the value, the power, and the authority of parents and the way they educate their children. So coming from communism, I know how important that is. So go ahead and let us know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, education is a massive piece of the puzzle. You know, there's 7 mountains and it's pretty common vernacular now, but I think the education mountain is one of the most important, because what is the news media trying to do? They're trying to educate us to believe a certain way. What is entertainment doing? Well, entertainment is trying to educate us to believe and act a certain way. Politics, they're educating us. Business is also educating us. So education, the way you think, the framework that you have in your mind, is an absolutely critical part of how you see the world, the things you believe, and how you act in the world. And I wanted to talk really briefly today about what God's vision for education originally was. Okay, and America, we know, is a Christian nation, not because Christians were the ones that founded it, but because it was founded on the Christian principles and a connection to the living God. And this whole idea of liberty and freedom, personal freedom, accountability, the politics of responsibility and freedom was birthed into the earth at Mount Sinai when God set the people free out of Egypt, drew them to himself, and then gave them the law. The law was a way that you could create people who were slaves that didn't know how to live together and rally them together, worship under God, and have structure in their lives, so that in their liberty with God, there would be order, there would be structure, God's covenant. So the Sinai covenant, far from being like an Old Testament thing that's been canceled out, Jesus fulfilled everything that was in the Old Testament. But the Sinai covenant shows us that God was very concerned with the education of the next generation. All right? And I just want to explain this to you, because in the Exodus chapter 12 and 13, that's the last plague of the Exodus, the plague of the firstborn, the death of the firstborn, and the deliverance out of Egypt. In those chapters 12, 13, and 14, Moses has a speech to the people who have just watched God do something in power, and he's setting all the people free. And in this moment, Moses doesn't gloat about the power of God. You know, he doesn't talk about how bad and evil Pharaoh is and our God's better than your God. He tells them it's time to depart. And 3 different times during these 2 chapters in Exodus 12, 13, and 14, I think, 3 chapters, 3 times Moses says something about when you tell this to your children in the future, when you teach your children in the future, and when you get into the land, you will tell your children. Okay? And when you get into the Sinai covenant, there's a lot in that covenant about teaching your children, binding the word of God to your forehead and to your wrist, putting it on your doorposts of your heart, and teaching your children. Why does Moses so focus on the instruction of the next generation? Well, there is a difference between the way the pharaohs did things. The pharaohs built altars and monuments of stone. They built pyramids and tombs, okay? And they knew if you wanted to pass on the empire, the powerful, glorious empire of the pharaohs, you built monuments of stone. But if you want to pass on a civilization, you have to educate the next generation. So this is what the world system does. It builds empires and monuments in stone, and that passes along an empire. But a civilization is passed by the education of the next generation. And y'all, that is why it's so important as parents to be a participant in the education. All right, state-sponsored schools was, well, that's a relatively new development. There's actually some interesting history of the Jewish tradition, making sure that everybody was educated. More than having opportunities to go do business, they needed to have their children educated, because we know that we're one generation away from losing the minds and the hearts of the people. So in the Sinai Covenantal Republic that was established, education of the next generation was the key to that piece of the puzzle. And so I just wanted to encourage you guys, I know how hard it is to have young children, to have them in public school. I've got 3 elementary, middle school kids right now. And we're talking about whether we do homeschool or whether we keep them in public school. And we've got one in private school and one maybe homeschool, and one's definitely in public school. But y'all, the biggest thing I think that you can do is to teach and impart to your children the next generation of love and commitment and demonstration of who the Father is. Okay, because the education of the Hebrew children at the Exodus, this wonderful story, this wonderful, pertinent, prophetic moment, that was a remembrance of the things that God did in your life. Okay, and as parents, if we are instructing our children, demonstrating the fulfillment of the things that God has done in our own lives, and then showing them those moments, then they're going to catch the power of God's impartation of liberation and freedom. And I just want to finish with one little story. I hope this is making sense to you guys. We went to a Flashpoint Live thing a couple of weeks ago in Atlanta, Georgia, and we took our kids and we sat on the second row, and we were there. And I've talked to my kids quite a bit about the scriptures, and they know a lot, and I pray for them every night, and we've been in church services. But about 2.5 hours into this Flashpoint Live service, they did personal ministry, and Mario Murillo got up and he started calling out words of knowledge and words of wisdom, and Hank Kuhneman was there doing the same thing. And they reached out they called somebody out in the audience. They reached out their hands, prayed for them. And I was not with my kids. I was up in the balcony looking down, and I watched my little 10 and 11-year-olds put their hands out and pray. And I came back down after that, and both of my young kids looked at me with these big eyes, and they say, "Dad, did you see that? It was a miracle. Jesus healed somebody. I've never seen that before." And they were asking me when the first time I saw a miracle was. And what happened with my kids a couple of weeks ago was that my next generation of children, God imparted through an encounter in a group, he imparted the power and the demonstration of the love of God to heal, save, and set people free in a tangible way to the next generation. And what I did as a dad, I brought them, and that's why we need the church, and we need to bring our children to in-person gatherings where they're watching and participating and being part of this. And this is one of the things I love about Georgian and Global Celebration, is that they go and they minister to kids, and they have kids that go and minister and young people. That is one of the most important ways that you could instruct this next generation, because sure, lots of people are talking about CRT and the Marxist brainwashing and all the things in public schools, and there's a lot there. But y'all, one encounter with the power of the living God, an introduction to the Father in a personal and tangible way, will change your life and change your children's life and impart that to the next generation. So I would just encourage you guys to do that, to don't feel panicked and afraid. We do have to stand up. We do have to resist. But if you resist with anger and rationality and you don't introduce your kids to the power of Jesus, what are you doing? You're teaching your kids how to be angry. You got to teach them how to encounter God. I think that's one of the biggest things.
It is. And thank you for being a good dad and faithful, because that encounter was culminated from years and days and nights that you're putting the kids to sleep with the Lord and the word and demonstrating. So I appreciate that. You're a good dad and you're a good model. And I know your word is very encouraging for this generation of fathers and mothers, especially the younger ones, like the millennial young, like my daughter's age. They're right now in this season of cultivating the hearts. So it's so important what you said. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting us right in the middle of travel, that you're taking the time. We really appreciate that. Bless you,
I
Adam.
appreciate it, Georgie, and thank you.